I'm Brian Clevinger. I'm a partner in the Yield Lab Global Opportunity Fund, along with Kyle Welburn and Ted Simons. Wow, it's back again, isn't it?
Is it me?
It goes away when I mute. That's interesting. Oh well, I'm just going to ignore it. So like partner at Yield Lab. I'm also a partner in a fund here in St. Louis, a life science fund in St. Louis that's been around now for about 20 years, called Prolog Ventures. Prolog Ventures was a life science fund. Yield Lab is strictly ag tech, and Yield Lab is a very interesting organization. Some of you probably know this, that we have operations all across the world. In fact, if you're looking at this Rogues Gallery here, one of our partners, Larry Taylor, is in the Asia Pacific location in Singapore, and down, well, wow. Claire Perubla is also Larry's partner in Singapore. But we also have operations in Buenos Aires, our LATAM group. We have accelerators here in St. Louis, as well as the Global Opportunity Fund. The accelerators are mentoring organizations and investment organizations. The Global Fund typically follows in a seed stage or early stage type of investing. We're totally ag tech, and I think we have one of the most extensive networks, ag tech networks there is. We have something like 55 partners around the world in various organizations. And by the way, I left out Brandon Day. He heads up what's known as the Yield Lab Institute. It's the nonprofit arm for the Yield Lab. But altogether, we got about 55 partners. We have at least that number, if not more, of various consultants and collaborators. So we really are a global operation with our fingers practically everywhere. So joining me is on this panel is Martha Schlichter. And Martha and I go almost as far back as Duke Leahy and I do. Martha was an officer in one of the very early Prolog investments called Chlorogen. And Chlorogen didn't work out all that well, but I'd like to think that we sparked Martha's entrepreneurial pathway. She's been involved in a number of different ag tech entrepreneurial startups. And in fact, right now, she is running two, not one, but two of the global funds, high-tech, ag tech startups. So, Martha, I thought maybe I'd give you a chance just to say a little bit more of all the things that you're doing. You're quite a busy lady.
Sure, Brian. Thanks for the invitation, and good to see all of you. So I, as Brian mentioned, I am involved in the entrepreneurial community here in St. Louis by being what's called an entrepreneur in residence at Biogenerator, which is the venture arm of BioSTL, which many are familiar with, is very focused on really growing the whole life sciences ecosystem here in the region. And in the case of Biogenerator, really helping to nurture, advance, seed fund, and foster, oftentimes in partnership with Yield Lab, startups in the life sciences area in the region. Really a really effective group that has done a fantastic job in helping companies get non-dilutive funds that makes all investors happy, as well as to also make investments, do significant amounts of diligence that oftentimes helps to secure additional investment and really, again, grow that ecosystem quite successfully. So they take a little amount of money and make it go a really long way. So in my role as an entrepreneur in residence there, I really joined to help grow the ag food tech part of the Biogenerator portfolio, which is much smaller in comparison to what they've really done on the health sciences side. And so to that end, working with Charlie Bolton, we have formed a new ag startup called Cisteris to focus on ag sustainability and to really look for intellectual property to advance into what we hope will be numerous startups by bringing back together a lot of agricultural talent that still resides in this community, as well as intellectual property that is somewhat stymied, is in a university lab and doesn't have the resources to go forward, is sitting down the street at Bayer, and it isn't something that's big enough or core enough for them to consider. And so we're really bringing back together ag management talent with intellectual property in the area to advance it. And that's in early stages, but following a very successful Biogenerator model that has done that very well, more on the health sciences side to date. So to that end, the goal is to really help ensure the whole ag portfolio is going to be successful so that we can attract and retain more ag startups in the region. And to that end, to Brian's point, I was asked to first take on the CEO role for Impetus, which is an early stage agricultural company that was attracted here to St. Louis because of the capabilities of the likes of Yield Lab and Biogenerator, and is focused on biological control for insects. And then subsequently, because they didn't think I was busy enough, a second job taking on the CEO role of Plastomics, which is a company developing a new platform for introducing traits, biotech traits, via the chloroplast versus the nucleus. And that's a very neat story in that the founder of the company, an individual by the name of Dr. Jeff Staub, actually co-created the chloroplast technology when he was a graduate student at Rutgers. That technology was then licensed to Monsanto. Jeff subsequently took a role at Monsanto, where off and on he worked on that technology. Monsanto ended up not pursuing the technology, which had nothing to do with the value of the platform, but for different kind of corporate budget cutting reasons at the time. And when Jeff retired, he went back to what he calls his first true love. I don't know how much his wife likes hearing that, but to work on chloroplast transformation. And so working together with that team, we're making some really nice progress there as well.
Good. Let's take this up to a very high level and talk about ag tech investing from that vantage point. If you would have asked me probably as recently as 8 years ago or so, well, what do you think about investing in ag? And I could have given you a list of reasons why I didn't think it was such a good idea. There was very few exits to talk about. It seems like the only exit possibility was to sell to what, 4 major seed companies in the world. There wasn't much venture capital. You know, venture capital hates to invest by itself. Those were all really good reasons to be skeptical about investing in ag. Martha, what changed? What caused all of a sudden this explosion of interest in ag tech?
Yeah, which is quite exciting, because I'd agree, Brian. Thank heavens for Prolog, because you guys were lonely back then, right? But helped to create, you know, one of the exits that was a success, right, in Divergence. So great story there.
Yep.
So, you know, to me, a lot has changed, and a lot of it has all kind of come together in a very short period of time, which is pretty exciting. One, I would say, is a recognition of the importance of addressing climate change and sustainability, and how agriculture can be a source of the problem or really a big part of that solution. And that has opened up non-traditional funders in agriculture who see that benefit of mitigating climate change. It has also opened up other non-dilutive funding that really wasn't available to agriculture outside of the USDA, unlike the ways it's really available right on the health sciences side. There's also now significantly more venture involved, and I think that's because there's some things that are much sexier to venture now. So there's new technologies like CRISPR, or everything that has happened in alternative meats, right? Plant-based proteins for food sources. Biological
precision agriculture is such a big deal
great,
these days. Yeah,
absolutely. Sensors and controls, biological products, an alternative to chemical products when there's all kinds of concerns about chemical residues, and drift, and protecting non-target species. And all of those things have shorter or non-existent regulatory development timelines that aren't on the order of, 10 to 15 years, without the clarity of really specific gates and phases like there are, with the FDA. And so now, some of these ventures can see an exit in, less than 5 years, which was certainly never the case when Brian, you were making those early investments, I imagine.
even Divergence was like a 9-10 year process before it got sold to Monsanto. Yeah, yeah.
And the nice thing to your point is it kind of cascades now, right? More venture interest, more educated venture interest, more companies, thus more exits, thus more success. I mean, we are all so quite excited here about the recent Benson Hill news, for sure, right?
And I'm happy to say that Prolog was an early investor in Benson Hill, so good for us.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well deserved.
You need those kinds of very high profile exits that everybody can point to and say, see, you can make money investing in ag. And Benson Hill story, I hope if you haven't already had Matt Crisp on a forum like this, it's a fascinating story. The short version of it is, it was a spin out of Donald Danforth Plant Science, or the two scientists that came out of Donald Danforth Plant Science, started up the company, brought in Matt Crisp, the CEO. And when our investment thesis was actually in probably the least valuable part of the company. It was a couple of genes that enhanced photosynthesis. And so that sounded like a pretty decent thing, but it turns out that really what it's about now is high value protein, and it's about big data. I think it was the second round of financing, maybe the third round of financing. Google Ventures, GV, came in and put in a ton of money into the company. And all of a sudden it started growing like Topsy and became the unicorn that it is. And of course, another part of the story right now is timing's everything, right? SPACs are crazy right now. And this is a company, a special purpose acquisition company that allows the company to go out without going through the pain of a completely underwritten IPO. Of course, nobody knows what the returns are yet because it actually hasn't closed for another couple of months. And then all those poor schmucks that have stocks will be locked up for at least 6 months. So, talk to me next year, and I'll tell you whether it was a good investment or not. It certainly is a good, 1.2 or $3 billion, not a bad place to start.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
And Brian, you're bringing up another point there to me that makes the foresight that BioSTL and other community leaders had decades ago to double down on biosciences and make the investment in the Danforth Plant Sciences Center and the greenhouses and the growth chambers and all the unique instrumentation there that gives startups like Plastomics access to corporate-like capabilities, right, that you don't have in many places, right? And so you're able to really do things at a very sophisticated and quality manner that allows you to generate data that when you go to try to do a deal, with a corporate, that data is respected. They understand how it was generated, right? It isn't having to go back to square one. And so I think that I like to say St. Louis creates some unfair advantages for ag startups. And I think those are examples of it, in addition to the other things 39 North and the whole community is continuing to try to advance.
So back in 2015, when my partner at that time started Yield Lab Accelerator, he looked around and saw in St. Louis that there was accelerators for life science, for fintech. I think there was a sports, there was a game, there was all kinds of accelerators, yet there was not an accelerator at that time in, I think, the most unique asset that St. Louis has, which is our ag tech network. And we hear all the time, I'm just keeping it on faith that it's true, that there are more PhD plant scientists in St. Louis than anywhere else in the world. And I'm sticking to it. Anyway, it is, as you say, Martha, we've got a huge advantage to start up here. Of course, it doesn't hurt that Monsanto got bought by Bayer, and suddenly there was a bunch of really talented people out there, all of whom were at high levels at Monsanto, all of whom had ideas for companies. And of course, that brings me to another good example here in St. Louis of a company that is near and dear to Prolog's heart. We're an investor, is CoverCress. And there's an example of really one of the higher level professionals at Monsanto, Jerry Steiner, came out and basically for no salary, only equity, started running. Well, he was actually the second leader. Plummer was the first.
Yeah, another Monsanto executive.
Another Monsanto, they're everywhere. And you know, in St. Louis, you've either worked for Monsanto or Washington University, and you know that nobody else exists. Anyway, Jerry comes out and starts up this company about utilizing a cover crop. Cover crops are what they sound like. It's a crop that you grow. In this case, it's a pennycress variant that you grow in between corn and soy rotations. And it gives a farmer a third crop. And this crop generates like soil, oil, and fiber and feed. So the company is doing quite well. It's got some very important investors. So again, it's one of those cases where all the ingredients were here, leadership was here, the greenhouses were here. Actually, it helps that the USDA is not too far away and various services are not too far away. So all of that comes together to make for a good investment strategy. So Yield Lab's in it, Prolog's in it, Cultivation Capital's in it, all kinds of folks.
Biogenerator.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And, you know, to me, Brian, that's another good example of looking around the corner, because CoverCress started at a time when sustainability really hadn't taken off. And so getting a grower to plant a cover crop was a tough slog, especially in the cases where they didn't have a product like protein or oil. And now a grower, you know, Bayer is paying growers to put in place two kinds of practices, you know, no-till practices and cover crops. And so, boy, a grower can get a benefit of a credit that then can be sold to somebody else trying to offset their footprint. In addition, in this case, you know, to also potentially having a lower greenhouse gas footprint biofuel or, you know, consumer oil as well as meal. You know, your point on Jerry and Dennis, I think, is also great in that one of the things I think Charlie Bolton was great about with Biogenerator was again kind of seeing around the corner. And initially when, you know, Pfizer just made the decision to leave town, it left behind some really talented Pfizer executives that Biogenerator really believed in, you know, from Charlie's own Pfizer experience, and doubled down on creating, you know, the ability for them to create their own startups in the life sciences space by retaining that great talent here in St. Louis and creating that great, you know, value. And so we saw that same thing kind of happening with the acquisition of Monsanto by Bayer. And we don't want to lose that talent from town. So here we go again, right? We're forming this agricultural startup to put back together these individuals with the intellectual property so that we can help advance a number of additional ag startups in the region.
Yeah, yeah. So Martha, we've been extolling how wonderful it is to do this in St. Louis, but you're in a perfect position. I don't know how many startups you've been involved with now in the ag world. What are the challenges that you see? It may be ag tech in general, but maybe also ag tech, particularly here in the Midwest.
Yeah. Well, so first I'll start with one that's an advantage. So one of the advantages that we have here versus the coast, either coast, is ability to pay people something more in line with what a startup can afford to pay than some of the crazy kind of salaries you have to pay on the coast. I would say I see this having been on boards on both coasts as well as over in Europe. There's also more of a willingness, I don't know if it's this Midwest quality of really trying to ensure the company can be successful. And so to your point, people willing to work more for equity than for salary. And again, I think that is part because they can live more affordably here, and so it works, right? Now, there's also the challenge then of being able to attract talent. So if you've got talent already in the region, fantastic. But it's still a real challenge to try to attract talent here from out of the region, especially as a startup. You know, you're competing with other people on the coast that have a more attractive package for them. And to relocate somebody, of course, is a pretty tough thing. You also, which I guess is both a good problem and a bad problem, you're competing with Bayer, and now you're competing with Benson Hill. And as a startup, you know, you aren't sitting on, you know, the comfort to give an employee that you have 3 or 4 years of funding, right? They're really having to be willing, you know, to take the risk and to believe in the technology and what you're doing. I'd say another huge benefit here is the community. So this community, to me, again, versus the coast, is a very supportive community. So for example, you know, I was having some concerns about how to deal with something in both of my startups. And I just reached out to Jerry Steiner and asked for some advice, right? From what he had been through with Covercress. Brian, you know, certainly you guys and Biogenerator Cultivation Capital are always willing to talk to any startup here, whether you're invested in them or not, and, you know, try to help us think about the best way to structure it, to think about the cap table, to think about the pros and cons of whether to take, you know, notes or equity. And I think that level of community here is really, really unique. And if a startup is savvy enough to reach out for that help, can really prevent themselves from, you know, getting into a situation a couple years in that makes it pretty hard, you know, to be attractive to outside venture. So I probably said more positives than negatives because that's kind of how I feel about this community.
Okay. Well, another experience that you've had, which can be a long and bloody one, is corporate partnering. And you've been able to pull off a number of those. And as an investor, like it's always scary to see a portfolio company enter into a portfolio or into a partnership with, well, for example, Divergence got acquired by Monsanto, but almost its entire life, Divergence had as a corporate partner helping develop their products in Monsanto. So you always worry about, well, have you eliminated all of the potential bidders for the company? And in Divergence's case, thank goodness, Monsanto came through. But tell us your thoughts about, I know you've just really kind of inked some agreements with some outside companies. What kind of advice would you give to entrepreneurs, because it's getting to be more and more common that these startups have fairly early in their lives corporate partnerships?
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing is if you are planning an exit that involves a corporate partner, you better early on need to know what's the checklist that would make you of interest to them, because that really helps hone your strategy, right?
Right.
And better if, as you're talking to all of these different corporates, those are similar things, right? So I think, again, it depends on the type of company that you have. If you're a biotech company as a startup, there's no way you can envision an exit that's anything other than a strategic, because the costs are so high, the development times are so long. But you want to try to keep yourself open. I mean, you might be working on multiple crops, you might be working on multiple traits, and the more you can keep the flexibility open so that you aren't married to a single strategic, the better. I'd also say we don't know, and this is somewhat worrisome at this time, we don't know how things are going to play out now that there has been such additional consolidation with the ag multinationals, right? And so now you really have, Syngenta, Bayer, and Corteva. And I'll say this as a Monsanto alumni, I'm sure some other Monsanto alumni would join me and say, Monsanto was really, really valuable to the startup community in that they made it very clear early on that they would welcome any good idea. It didn't have to just come internally. And they were also assertive, right? So it made the entire industry have to be more assertive, or for fear that if they didn't move quickly, they would lose out to Monsanto, and oftentimes that was the case. So now that all this consolidation has happened, all of them are still trying to get through their acquisition and merger portfolios and people selection and other such things. I worry a little bit that the assertiveness gene isn't apparent out there right now. And so I think we're going to have to see a couple of we're going to have to see alternative exits like what Benson Hill just did. And we're going to have to see a couple of surprising acquisitions that will kind of wake up the other strategics to get that momentum, kind of back in that system. So I think the good thing is all of them are very interested and have expressed interest in collaborations without exclusivity. And we just have to make sure that those things don't lead to the divergence, 7, 10-year time frame in order to be able to have exit options.
Yep. So if I get asked every once in a while, what's hot in ag tech investing? And actually, Larry and my other Clara can chime in if they like. What we're seeing a lot of are biologicals. So biological pesticides, biological herbicides. Well, Martha is leading a biological pesticide company, and Plastomics is, I guess you'd call molecular biology, almost like a tools company. But what's true about biologicals is that typically they have the longer way through the regulatory pathway. And that almost says, gee, somewhere along the line, you need to bring in that corporate partner to be able to have the resources to go through what is still a fairly lengthy and expensive procedure. It's almost like going back to the old days of pharma investing, right? It's highly regulated, takes a lot of money. You need a corporate partner at some point or another. Does that kind of issue bother you at all with your companies, Martha?
Yeah, so I'd maybe contrast the two. So in the case of Impetus, where the first products will be spray-on biologicals, which have a pretty quick regulatory timeline, less than 2 years typically. And so there, the issue more, the negative on biologicals is growers have to believe they're equivalent or better to their chemical counterparts.
Right.
So they're very attractive and hot right now because of all the regulations in Europe that are shutting down the biologicals that negatively impact non-toxic target species. And that's cascading, to California and certainly to consumers here in the US. But for us, in the case of Impetus, with a strategic partnership we just did based on laboratory data, we could have a product commercial as soon as 2025 or 2026. So reasonable time frame. In contrast, something that we're doing, to your point, in the case of Plastomics, that's going to be regulated as a transgenic, there you gotta have a corporate partner. And the reality is the corporate partner there wants to come in early because you want to start the regulatory package development early because it takes so long. And so they really want to be doing that, with their germplasm and in their kind of, controlled regulatory development process. And the beauty for the startup and for the investors is typically if they're going to do that, they're going to pay for it, right? They're going to pay for all of your development work. They might even do some of it themselves. And so that dramatically reduces, that amount of money that you've got to bring in. For a biotech trade, it's still discovery to commercialization, 10 to 15 years, and can be $150 million.
Yep. Back to pharma, right?
Yeah.
So, as I mentioned earlier, precision farming is such a big topic. That's probably the other area where I would say, and actually you could even consider biologics a part of precision farming. But what's cool about precision farming is it includes things like drones and imaging and all kinds of cool technology. And we've invested a little bit. In fact, when I first started in 2016, if I was asked back then, what's the hottest stuff? I would say it's probably imaging, drones and that sort of stuff. We got so tired of seeing drone companies. It was amazing. But that's kind of gone by, and now we're using satellite technology, all kinds of imaging technologies that just go to show you how ag investing has changed. Nobody,
no kidding.
Climate Corp right here in St. Louis was kind of the first well-known precision farming company, and it's changed. The business models that we're probably most scared of right now is where the company wants to sell directly to the farmer. Because I used to think the hardest nut to crack in terms of a B to C kind of sell were physicians. They were the hardest people in the world to get them to change their activities. I think maybe farmers are even a little bit harder because they, the generational farms still exist. Big corporate farms are probably a little more adaptable, but right now those people are just being inundated with new technologies, new data, and whatever. How in the world do we introduce new products to the farmer?
Yeah, you're right. And distribution is the other thing in the middle, right? That is definitely not wanting anything to go direct. I mean, we have a really good, I'll call it experiment going on right now, although it's probably not become an experiment with a capital E. And Larry could probably comment on this as well, in that we have FBN, Farmers Business Network, right? Which is like the Amazon for farmers, that is working to sell, chemistry, and now has acquired a seed company, so seed and traits directly to growers. And so they're trying to upset the apple cart a little bit in trying to figure out a way to do that. Of course, they're not yet public, although certainly have been quite successful and have quite a grower customer base now. And that's probably creating some healthy tension in the ag marketplace that that probably is good, per my previous comments on all the consolidation that has occurred, and that they're a little bit of a wild card out there. Brian, as you're talking about precision ag, I'm starting to see a lot of things that are also around measurement and tracing in the supply chain, both because of, concerns about, E. coli, as well as just all of the supply chain disruption that was so evident in agriculture over the course of the last year. Are you guys seeing that? Are you starting to see new things that are more across the whole value chain?
I wouldn't say it was a major area. Larry and Claire can disagree with me, but again, I think the hottest thing we're seeing right now is biologicals and various imaging technologies. There are some supply chain stories out there, but I wouldn't say it's one of the bigger groups. Larry, how about you? You guys seeing a lot of that? You're in Singapore, by the way. So talk about being in the middle of a supply chain. They're right there.
Yeah.
You're muted. You're muted.
Indeed, we do think that this is important. There's been a history of what the industry in the fresh fruit and vegetables calls track and trace, and so that part there's been sort of a lame start, but now they're able to add to that the ability to connect with the shipping information and the insurance, and so reduce the claims, and potentially add financial options. And so we're seeing that this is being called for. We've also got several models that are being developed in the seafood industry, which has a pretty bad reputation between the consumer and the producer. And so, yes, we see this coming on. It's highly complex because these you have to add multiple modules. But yes, Claire, what have I left out?
Not much. It's quite early here, so I thought I'd let Larry be my mouthpiece since I'm not so articulate.
It's very early.
I've been up since like 4. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot happening here, and Singapore is has an initiative called 30 and 30, which has caused a great deal of focus around a few things. One is aquaculture. The other is controlled environment agriculture, and clean meat, or so that it is about sustainability. And because of this initiative for 30 and 30, it's driven a lot of the focus that's emanating out and around the ecosystem here in Singapore to be focusing on those 3 things. The government has thrown a lot behind it in regards to grants. Has thrown a lot behind in regards to finding a safe haven for innovators in regards to intellectual property and other things, and also standing up as only Singapore can do. You just make one decision and disseminate a memo, and everybody's got it within a couple of days, which says, everybody's going to now shift to this, and this is your focus at NUS, at SMU, at and down the university lines, and also the research institutes here, like A-Star, et cetera, and also to be able to say, even on this small island, we're going to now shift everything that's on this one massive amount of acreage that's in the up by Malaysia, and build out, trying to build out a Danforth Plant Science Center.
Wow,
basically.
wow.
So it's they made no bones about it, to tie it back to St. Louis, that the idea has always been to replicate what St. Louis has here in Singapore. And meetings have been had 3 years ago about the same thing, and gleaning information. Of course, as has been said, it took St. Louis maybe 25, 30 years to build this ag ecosystem, whereas in Singapore, they are trying to do it in 2 years, and can do it because they can deploy the money. But anyway, back to the innovation, we're sitting smack in the middle of the smallholder farmer ecosystem. So a lot of the innovation is focused. New innovation is focusing on that. If you're looking outside of Singapore, and because you've got 150 million, about the same amount each, smallholder farmers in India and in Indonesia, with 300 million in the entire region in smallholders. So the opportunities are fantastic, you know, and you can't go wrong with a country that's got 1 billion engineers in it. So India. So everything is pretty much oversold from engineering perspective, in innovation, you know, fintech, etc. So those bright minds are shifting to agri-food, which is a great help in the deal flow area. So we see lots of innovation that's just amazing, and so no lack of that. And then you've got, you know, just around the corner, you've got China, which is up just a bit north, and they have their 3,000 member get together barbecue with the Communist Party meeting a month ago, and all the 3,000 members disseminate into Beijing. They get their marching orders, you know, from Central Command on what the focus is, and out they go. And one of the big marching orders is, you know, any available arable land needs to be turned into food producing. You know, get your act together regarding the terrible state, the land that is ag related. Start cleaning that up, and you know, start to get the universities to take the innovation that they've cooked up inside and commercialize it. So you're going to see a lot of energy coming from that. Anyway, I hope that helps. A bit of a diatribe early in the morning.
This is what's cool about the Yield Lab network. We've got people all over the world who have a lot of similar experiences, but also a lot of unique experiences, because if there's anything that's certainly true about ag is that no two situations are quite the same. You've got different weather, you got different pests, you've got different, you know, distribution issues, all those kinds of stuff. And our network has somebody that knows something about all of that sort of stuff. That's great. Hey, Brandon, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't, I don't know if you've had a chance to talk in this forum at all, but do you want to give a thumbnail of what you're doing with the Institute?
Yeah, sure. I actually, we did speak with the Venture Cafe audience last month with.
Oh, okay. Well, then I didn't know that. All right.
No, that's
We
fine.
love your weekly emails, Brandon. They're a great summary of everything that's happened.
Thank you. They're my Friday evening activities. So
You're boring. Okay, good. And Angela, do you have anything else you want us to do?
Nothing on my side. I just want to once again give you guys a huge thank you for giving this session. This was super informative, and I'm really excited that we had such an exciting dialogue. A big thank you to Yield Lab for always supporting and for having these series with us. I won't say too much. I want to give you guys back the time that you have for the evening. So have a great rest of your evening, and we'll see you in future events. Thank you so much.